Welcome to another episode of the Shift Podcast. This is not just a podcast, it is a powerhouse of taking ownership of your performance, growth, and leadership education. It's an opportunity to shift yourself in the direction of your potential and impact those around you. This podcast is your gateway to a world of behavior change-based insights, psychology research, and knowledge from guest speakers, gathering years of experience in the corporate world as well as entrepreneurship. With years of coaching and mentoring professionals, my mission is simple: to make every moment you spend with me and my guests actionable and empowering. In this episode, I talk with Alka Bromiley, and we really discuss the ups and downs of challenges that she has experienced in her life and how she had to recreate and kind of reframe her mindset with everything that come in her way, whether it was cultural differences between who she was, where she was growing up, and expectations from society, whether it was the physical and verbal and emotional abuse that she suffered through her relationships, or just managing grief as tragedy struck her family, not once, but twice. I think it's inspiring to hear her story, and I hope you find it the same. Let me know what you think. Alka, welcome to the Shift Podcast.
Elena, thank you for having me.
I'm excited to chat with you. Shift Podcast is all about shifts, and you've had quite a number of those in your life. And so I'm really excited to get into it and just hear your story. I've heard it personally offline when you and I were chatting before, and I'm really excited for you to be able to share this on this platform. So take us back to, first of all, just give me a little snapshot of your career story and then your life.
Right from the beginning, before my career story, I guess, I was born in Kenya. I was 5 months old when my parents left Mombasa and came to England. With my two older sisters, it was a complete change, of course, for them. Initially, I was too young to understand. But as my life developed in England, I started facing a number of challenges. My background is I'm Indian, coming from an African country to England during a time where there was a lot of racism, a lot of rife, I guess. And being an Indian family, my parents worked really hard. They had to go through some challenges. And I guess as we move into talking about my career, a lot of those challenges started resonating in me, and I started struggling. I'm the youngest of two older sisters. I now have a younger sister as well, but at the time I was the youngest, and I kind of felt a little bit lost. I didn't have many friends because I'd come from this different background, and home culturally we were different. My parents wanted us to have more of an Indian upbringing. I wanted to go out with my English friends, and that really kind of developed more as I grew older and as I went into my career. So I struggled a lot when I got into that teenage age of, what am I going to do? Who am I going to be? Who am I? I didn't really know who I was at the time. And that took a long, long time. And even now, Elena, I know you and I have talked about your background and how you were an immigrant, how we really struggled with who we were at the time. And when it comes to careers, that was difficult, really difficult.
It's tough being a kid in general and a teenager, let alone feeling like you don't belong, because that's what we want the most, especially right at that age. Like, we just want to be with a cool crowd, or we want to be with just any crowd, in fact, right? Like, and if it's cool, if they're a cool crowd, even better. But that's kind of like, I feel like it's standard across board for most teenagers, and I can only imagine how difficult it is when you're not able to fit in. So how did that play out in terms of, like, did you act out, or how did that work for you?
Oh, I did. I used to sneak out the house with my oldest sister. I was like 13 and she was 17, 18. So she wanted to go out, and it was the way that I thought, oh, if she can get out, I can get out. I just have to be her accomplice. And so that's what I used to do. And I used to do that a lot. Maybe I was a bit of a rebel child. And as I said to you before, I didn't think it was a bad thing now, because I think being a rebel creates your personality. The older we are, of course, we understand now that some of those things weren't the right thing to do, but I also understand why I did things like that. It was so hard, Elena. When I was 11, 12, 13, getting into that teenage, if I wanted to go to the disco, my granddad had to chaperone me. I mean, how embarrassing is that? It's the only way I could do things was to rebel. So I did act out a lot, and I feel kind of proud saying that now.
You know what I'm curious about? because people have asked me this before, and it's like, what would have helped you at that age? That's what I'm curious. Like, what would have helped you at that age, to maybe make different decisions, or maybe not be a rebel, right? So like to not act out. What do you think would have helped, if anything?
I think a number of things. It's a really good question. No one's actually asked me that, so I do have to think about it. But I did have role models at the time. I just didn't realize that they were role models. I didn't realize that my oldest sisters were there to guide me in a way. I just thought of them as my annoying sisters, and they were great academically and I wasn't. They were, of course, living their lives, and my parents as well. I didn't see them as role models. I just thought them as being my strict, annoying parents. When my sister said to me some months ago, she said they were only trying to do what they wanted to do best, or what they knew to do best, which is to raise their children in the way they've been brought up. But I think that if I'd understood the power of having good role models, and I only learned about values at a very late stage in my life. I didn't know what I valued in life at that age. All I knew was I was different. I didn't want to be that different. I wanted to blend in. And I had a tunnel vision. So I think that if I had some good, solid understanding of some of the things that we have now that we didn't have then, I never really used to read a lot, because again, when you're a rebel, you just have focused in things that you're not supposed to do. And I think a lot of that was because we were just guided in so many different ways. The religion played a big part in my life at home. And now I'm spiritual. I respect other people having a religion, but I don't. So I wish that in some ways I understood more at a younger age the importance of the different choices we could make in life. Really have that. And I can't blame my parents. As I said, they'd moved to a new country. They were just trying to do their best to raise 3 girls at the time. And I had a brother who passed away, so they experienced a lot of grief. And then I have a younger sister now. So they had a lot of grief and turmoil in their lives. And the last thing they wanted was a teenage daughter who was playing up. And I never really understood what they were going through. So that would have helped, having more guidance, maybe.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you said there were people around you like that were kind of acting as mentors, but you almost didn't recognize. And that's how I feel like when somebody asked me a question, I was like, I don't know, I've said all these things, but then it's like, I don't know if that would have helped. I don't know if I would have still be blinded by the rebellious nature in me at that time, and whatever 13-year-old emotions that I was going through. So it's so I relate very much. It's like there's so many different factors, but I mean, it's a good point. You said like the fact that we can make different choices, and I can see how that would have been helpful, but also how difficult it is once you're in that mindset of like, I'm just going to do all the bad choices, because that's how I feel, like that's how I was. I'm just going to make all the bad choices. Right. So it's but it led you to where you are today, and that's the beautiful, it's all part of the journey, right?
It's all part of the journey. And talking about careers, I, like you and I have spoken about this, have been more into the vocational journey. I loved doing my hotel and catering management degree. My parents thought, oh my God, what are you doing? You should follow the journey of, my father was an accountant, my uncle was a doctor, following those pathways of, how about going to do law? And I'm like, I don't want to do any of that. I want to do something totally different. I want to rebel. I want to go into hotel and catering. And so I did that, not knowing how much I was going to need it as I got older, and how my path was really meant to go down this road, which is the coaching, the training, the development, the podcasting route, sharing, communicating, providing the help and support that maybe I didn't get. As you said, what would I have needed? I would have loved to have had somebody like you, or even me, to listen to go, okay, there's something different in the world. I don't have to go down that path. I can go down this path and try it and learn and grow. And if it doesn't work, I've learned something and I can try another path. I think that knowing now what I did then somehow or another, it was meant to be for me to get all these other skills that I may have not gone if I'd gone down a traditional pathway of some of those jobs that are mainline jobs, I guess we could call them.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. And it's you know, it's tough, you know, because I mean, again, like I know I talk to people all the time about their stories, and it's interesting how things works out, you know. And I like it that you said you're kind of more spiritual than you are religious, because I think at some point, you know, it's like with the expression, like you want to make God laugh, make a plan. You know, at some point you just have to trust that things are, you know, obviously if you're, you know, doing the best that you can, but at some point things kind of fall together in all the right places. But I'm curious, was there like a pivotal moment for you when you're like, I don't think I want to make these choices anymore. I want to change the choices that I'm making?
Yes, there was. During the age of, I would say, 2021, right up until I was about 36, I went through some very volatile relationships by that I mean boyfriends. I married the wrong person. My previous boyfriends one of them was particularly abusive physically. So I went through the physical, the verbal, the mental, the emotional abuse. And that was a long period. I never learned from the first time. I always seem to have this pattern of picking these men in my life who maybe made me feel less confident. And I got into this rut. I didn't know how to get out of it. And a part of me, I think, felt like I needed to be punished because I was the rebel. I did leave home when maybe I shouldn't have done. And the pivotal moment, the changing point, was when my father died. And I just turned 26, literally days, and my father passed away. And I remember now going through those weeks after he'd passed. We mourn in my culture for a long time. And I was at home and I was sat there thinking, what am I doing? What am I doing in my life? My father would really not have been happy with me. And we didn't have a great relationship when he passed away. I wasn't very communicative, which is why another reason why I think communication is so important to me now is because I didn't value it so much then. And that was a change. And I went back to where I was living and I left the partner I was with. It was a very dramatic exit as well. It was very aggressive and violent. And if I hadn't have left, Elena, I don't know what would have happened to me. I don't know whether I would be here now to tell the tale. I don't know whether psychologically I would have been in a completely different place, but maybe it was some guidance from my dad who gave me the strength to leave. And that was really, it was a changing point for me. In some ways, I didn't get married and marry the wrong person, but that's life.
Yeah.
Who knows? Sometimes you feel like you're going into the right environment and it's not for you, but you know what? I learned from it, and through that learning I am here where I am now. And I think sometimes it takes some of those moments in life, those experiences, those challenges that make us stronger. And that's what I feel that it made me. I look back now, I don't have any regrets. People say, do you regret it? No, I don't, because if I regretted it, I may not have been here where I am now. And I'm so happy, so happy. I have a wonderful husband, wonderful life. I live in America. I have great health care. I have a beautiful family. I have the support and love from people in my family who at the time were experiencing a lot of the stress because of me. But I'm so fortunate that they understood. And I think that's what life is. Things don't happen naturally. They just don't happen perfectly, is what I'm saying. You have to have some of these challenges because, as the song says, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And it's so true. It's so true.
Yeah, and I mean, I completely agree with you. I mean, it's you know, as you're talking, I just think about how often do we blame ourselves for certain things, but it's like, you know, we all do the best that we can with the information we have at that time, you know, and with the way that we feel about ourselves. And you're right, like there wasn't access to all this, podcasts and listening to other people, I mean, obviously there's also pros and cons to having all access to all these things. So there's also a lot of, bad information out there. But yeah, I agree. It's it's like you're doing the best that you can, and being a teenager and having grown up in in just a very, uncertain age in general, and uncertain the way you feel about yourself. And then that impacts your confidence so much. And what we typically tend to do, and especially in cultures like ours, right? Therapy or talking to somebody about your feelings or problems is taboo. So then you feel like you can't even talk about certain things. And then you're left with making your own decisions. And then it's like, but then it's like, if you're making them out of a place of fear and insecurity, those are usually not good decisions, but that's just what it is. And I think a lot of people feel that way, and a lot of people made those decisions. And so I think what you're saying is very relevant to a lot of people. And it sucks that we blame ourselves, but it's a blessing that at some point we, make that decision, like, hey, like, I don't have to do X, Y, and Z. And in your case, it was after your father's passing, which is a blessing on its own. And I'm sure that wasn't the end of that growth, right? I'm sure, like, even after that was probably just the first step to that continuous evolution of who you are today.
And Elena, just going back to some of the things you said there, I often think that we're programmed to blame ourselves. Traditionally, if we look at women in our lives, my mother was trained to take on the blame, take on the suffering, take on the household. And it was the cultural taboo of being a career woman, not being traditional in any way. And I think we see that as a role model to us, and we follow it, we mimic it. And now we have all these opportunities. And moving on to what you said about that was a stepping stone. Dad dying was a stepping stone to becoming stronger. And each day it's a step at a time, a step at a time, a step at a time. And each day, I believe we should look at it as a new page in our lives where we take the strength and we move on and see what else we can do to become stronger. And I very much enjoy the experience now of taking some of those memories. I don't see it as grief anymore. It's been time, and grief never ends. It's just the way you experience it and the way you look at it. And I look at it as positives now, and I take some of the good things about my dad and how he knocked on doors at the age of, how old was he when he came here? 25 maybe. And he knocked on doors to get a job. And I take that as tenacity, and take that as maybe a quality that I could possess, and I do possess. And my mother taking on a factory job and having to take 3 buses to get to that factory because she had to work. And I take that as her strength and what she had to do, and try and take some of her experiences to bring some strength in me and say, hey, that's what they had to do to raise us. What can I do to be a better person now in order to help my nieces, nephews? I have as I spoke to before we recorded, my step grandson came this weekend. And what can I do to be a better person for his future? So I think that some of the things that we experienced in the past, we often blame. And I did that a lot. I'm completely guilty of that. But the older I am now, I realize that we shouldn't use it as blame. We should use it as tools, as skills that we've gained to be better people, to leave the people around us in this world a better future.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that thinking. It's like, when people say, like, do you regret something? It's like, well, I think everybody wish they could have done things differently, but to put such a strong word as like regret or etc., it just adds no value. Like, did you learn from it? Yes. Can you use something? Can you move forward with this? Yes. And that's it. Like, that's what it's about. But regretting and holding on to things that are just not beneficial, because it's done. Like, you got to move forward, whatever it is, pick it up and just keep going. And you're right. And the best way to lead the future generations is by example, right? And it's and the fact that you've observed your parents working so hard, it probably gave you that, that strength as well, because maybe if you didn't observe certain things, you might not have been strong enough to even leave those situations, the abusive situations you were in. It probably would have broken you right then and there. So the fact that you survived those is a testament on its own, because not many people do. That's the reality, because it takes a certain kind of strong individual to be able to get yourself out and just survive that process alone, so it's something to be said to that. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And there are people now, Elena, that are experiencing things that I experienced 20, 30 years ago. And because I've moved on and I'm in a better place, the best thing I could do is take my experience and share it so other people may be able to get out of the horrible situations they're in and some of the struggles and the challenges. Because as we know, if we find out that we're not alone, one of the things about abuse and trauma is that you always think that you're the only one. You're the one who's going through this. Nobody else is going to understand. There's nobody there to help you. And so you become a recluse and you hide away, because often you feel embarrassed. Of course, I felt embarrassed when I told people that this was the way I was treated. Hey, this strong, independent woman was treated this way, and you feel so embarrassed. But it happens to many people, and we are only human. And we got into those situations and we got out, and the best thing to do is try and help other people by sharing our experiences.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's not easy to do anything alone, and it's especially when you're in that very vulnerable situations. It's hard. It's life is hard in general without a community, without people that you can really trust and open up to. And then when the person that's supposed to be the closest to you, who's your partner, your significant other, and if they're betraying that trust and that safe place, it makes it also very difficult, I imagine, to even trust anybody else outside of that. And so you get caught up in this loop of like, well, the evil we know is better the evil that we don't know, right? And that's why I think people get caught up in the familiar pain, as they call it, because it's like, well, I know this. I wonder if I'm curious, and because you said it took you a couple of relationships, and I think that's also very relatable, because we tend to stick with what we know, and because until you do that self-work to say I deserve better, it's almost as if you don't feel like you deserve better. So how long, what was that process like to, what were you doing to, I guess, get that confidence up and to tell yourself like, hey, like I deserve better than this. Like I deserve the love and respect and, from a kind human being.
First of all, was leaving, because when you're with somebody who suppresses you, they tell you that you're not worth it. They tell you that all you deserve is this. And look how lucky you are. You have me. I've put the roof over your head. I am no one else is going to love you. And the biggest thing was getting away from that. And once I got away and I realized that I had a real strong community around me, I had the love of my family. I had friends who stayed away in fear because they were afraid. They were afraid to help me. But once I left, they were, of course, my support structure. And with that, it was like a stepping stone. My sisters were there. My mum was there. My friends were there. They started helping and supporting me physically and mentally, telling me I was worth more, telling me how great I was, and look at all the skills I have, and look at the qualities that I have. And that helped me. It was like, when you're physically in pain and somebody comes and rubs the blood off your knee when you scraped it, and they put cream on and they put a plaster on, and then they help you get up and help you walk or whatever. It's that one step at a time. And it builds that strength in you until you get to a stage where you go, okay, this is me. This is the person who I want to be. I like being. I can be better. And that's how it started to come together. And every day you're learning, as I said, when we started this conversation. And one of the things that I stand by, I put it on my website, is we always strive for perfection. And I think that if we stop striving for perfection and we just take a step at a time, and have that continuous growth and learning. Every day is a win, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a good
And
way to think. Yeah.
yeah, so strive for continuous, just, continuous improvement. Strive for continuous improvement rather than perfection. That's what I say.
I love that. Go ahead.
And to get yourself away from those negative people.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that I'm saying that because you may be in an abusive relationship, but negativity can be seen in so many ways. Bullying, it happens in the workplace. I experienced that a lot during times of being in narcissistic relationships. What you experience at home, you take with you. You carry it like baggage, don't you? And so somebody makes you feel uncomfortable in your personal environment, you go to work, you feel unconfident at home, you take it to work with you, the people surrounding you go, oh, well, she's a softie. Oh, yeah, I'll push her around. Right?
Yeah.
So we need to.
Yeah. It's very interesting to, this thing you mentioned, super, super interesting, that this energy really does something, right? Like the energy that you show up with, and when it's almost like and you can see, and what's even more, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, because you're talking, I'm like, yeah, like you can see this. And when you've been there and you know what that feels and looks like, you can also recognize it in other people, right? Like you can recognize when somebody's like struggling with X, Y, and Z, because you know what that feels and looks like. Have you had experience like afterwards? Like, do you?
Absolutely. When I was working in, I won't mention any names, but I was working in a place in Dubai, and I felt it often where I'll tell you an example actually prior to that. When I was working in England, I used to work for a male manager in a very male dominated environment. And I did my 3 months of, what do you call it? A 3-month test,
What is it called? I lost the performance, whatever, the 90 days on the job thing.
Right.
I should know this. Wow. Anyway,
I wasn't, hey, it's Monday afternoon, Elena. Let ourselves off. So I did my 3 months, and he took me in the office, and I knew it wasn't for me. I wasn't enjoying it. And he said to me, you will never succeed. You will never succeed. You'll always just bumble around in this job and that job. And I always put that in the back of my mind. I go, well, I'm just going to remember that every now and then when I feel like I'm not succeeding, that this man told me that I was pretty much worthless and I wasn't going to succeed in life. And it happens. People have egos and they feel defensive. They feel like they're being threatened. They want better than you. They don't want you to succeed more than anything. We all want better, but don't put the other person down. Don't trample over them. We can all have a goal and help each other to gain that goal.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that now. I mean, look at us. We're both podcasters. We're both helping each other. We're supporting each other, and it feels great. And if we constantly think of it as a competition, we're going to be ruthless. We're going to think of our egos, and it really rubs off on us and the people we surround ourselves with and the people who want to be with us. And it's really, really prominent in the work environment, because we go to work to earn money. If we can do better than him, we'll get more money than him. We can do better than her, we can get her job, we'll be more powerful. Why do we have to see it that way? Why don't we just help each other and uplift each other, and we'd be in such a better position? I had it a lot. In my previous engagements, previous work. And I went in and out of jobs. I moved a lot. I lived in England, spent a lot of time in Spain. I lived in Cyprus. I lived in Dubai. I live here. Lots of different personalities, lots of diversity. I loved it. And it taught me to work and live with different personalities and to accept people. I had a wonderful time, and I wouldn't change it for anything, Elena. I really would. Learned so much about working with different people. And I appreciate that. I really do.
That thing is called probation period, by the way. As soon as you were talking, I was like, it's probation period. I didn't know this.
I'm
But
so glad it wasn't just me.
yeah. I was like, I couldn't remember for this. I knew what you were saying, but I was like, what is that thing called? What is that 90 days? The probation period. Yeah. You know what else is interesting is that typical people, like I always say this because it's like people that are that mean and just not just mean to other people. Like there's many ways to tell somebody, you know, X, Y, and Z, right? However you feel, like you can feel however you want to feel. You can, you know, everybody has their judgments. God bless. But there's when people are just plain mean and rude, that just says so much about how they are, what they think about themselves, how happy their life is. Like I always say, like you will never meet a happy, content, you know, self-aware, just, you know, happy person who's gonna like, no, they're not gonna talk crap to you. Like they're not gonna, you know what I'm saying? Because it's just like, nor, you know what I'm saying? Happy, content people just don't do that. You know, like, yes, you can be frustrated, you can be upset, but there's different ways to communicate. And when you're just mean, that like when people are just plain mean, it's just, it says so much about them. And what's the worst part is like, they don't realize, and you're like, you're just showing me exactly how miserable you are in your life. Nobody needs to be that mean to somebody in general. Like, you know what I mean? Or when they're shout or angry. Oh my God, take a chill pill, you know, you know what I mean? Go see a therapist or something. Talk to somebody needed. But yeah, so
Talk to me. Tell me what you
want to talk
want.
about something? Like I do that to people too. Like I say, have you had a bad day? You want to talk about it? You know? So it's yeah, but it's just unnecessary. So it's but yeah, it's very interesting the you know, your experiences, and I'm sure, and it's interesting how we're so different as people, yet so similar as human beings around the world, right?
It's so true. I mean, we all come into this world the same. We all leave the same way. We all are given birth to. We all die. But within this period of time that we have, it's really amazing, isn't it? How whether it's our genetics, wherever we've lived, what we've done, it makes us into the people that we fundamentally are. But we're all the same.
Yeah.
We're all the same. Yeah.
So you were also inspired to start a podcast called Changing Platforms. Talk to me about that.
Yes, my niece Krisha and I started Changing Platforms just over 2 years ago. We've just had our second anniversary. We started it as a passion project. Krisha came out as gay, and I just told you about my domestic violence experiences, and we felt that both of us had stories that we could share with others that may help them to make a change in their lives. And Krisha, of course, wanted to be openly gay. She lived in a country where at the time where it wasn't safe and to be open as a gay person. And as she was transitioning her life to come to England and be in a safer zone, she wanted to open up. She was turning 30. I just turned 50. So between us, we thought, great, an aunt and niece team. How fantastic is that? And people loved it. We started it, invited friends, people we thought we had great stories to share. They came on. We had a great season 1, to the extent that at one point we had over 8,000 listeners for one episode. And we were like, wow, this passion project is amazing. And we continued it. Krisha could not continue with me. She was in her early 30s. She's got so much going on that I took it over beginning of this year. And I'm just coming to the end of season 6. Coming up to next season, my 100th episode in over 55 countries. We've had some amazing stories, and it's all about inclusivity, equality, diversity, making a change in your life, and the lessons we learned from each other. So one of the key questions I always ask is words of wisdom. What have you learned in your journey to help others make a change in their life? And it's been brilliant. I've had authors, actors, singers, family members, famous people, people who just have a great story to share. And some of them are trauma, some of them aren't trauma, some of them are just wonderful, wonderful experiences. But the key is we all learn something, and hopefully it will help us to make that change. Love it. I love every minute of it.
I bet. No, it's a great platform, and Changing Platforms, it's amazing. And important stories, you know, like you said. I mean, it's just, I mean, you and I, we both love podcasting, but I think stories are so powerful in there. So they help me for sure. I mean, this podcast, I always joke, I'm like, yes, it's for my audience, but secretly it's for me.
It's
You know, I just
really
love it for
important.
myself.
It is. I think it resonated more in me when I first came to the States. A couple of years later, I joined Toastmasters, a speaking organization, and I did a speech on my domestic violence story. And a woman came up to me, complete stranger, and she said, can I talk to you? And she took me to one side and she says, I needed to hear that. I'm going through something similar and I'm so afraid. I think I've now got the courage, because if you can do it, I can do it. And that brought goosebumps down me, because I was like, oh my God, I've hopefully helped somebody. And I always say with the Changing Platforms podcast is, if one person listens and it helps them to make a change in their life, it's a win.
Yeah,
It's not
that's it.
about the number of listeners. It's not about, I don't make any money from it. It's about helping somebody to make a change. It's the storytelling.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah.
And where can people find you? Where's the Changing Platforms? Where do you hang out at the most?
Changing Platforms is on Spotify. The reason why it's on Spotify is we love to use music, so we like to do it safely, make sure that those singers and writers get their license and paid for, etc. So everything is above board. Find me on Spotify. You can find my website, changingplatforms.com. You'll find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Threads, all the usual places. So changingplatforms.com is the website, and you'll find all the information about me and my podcast and my coaching business on there as well. It's all on there.
Nice. And the last question I always ask my guests is, what is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
One question I wish they would ask themselves is, when I was young, let me tell you a story, Elena. When I was young, I always wanted to be like somebody else. I'm not talking about role models. I'm not talking about superheroes. I see people and they'd say something or do something, and I thought, oh wow, she's so cool, I want to be like her. And I'd start mimicking them. I was young. I'd start pretending to be like them, but it wasn't me. And I missed out on so much of me trying to be like somebody else. And I think that was a lot of the reasons why I delayed myself in finding my own values, finding out my own beliefs. So I do hope that people take a step back and sit back and look inside themselves and find out who they are, who they want to be. I want to be a kind, caring, loving person, and that's the most important thing. So ask yourself the question, who are you? Are you a kind, caring, loving person? Can you make a change to help somebody? A guest on my podcast said very recently, Cheryl Rogers, she's brilliant. She's a global philanthropist. And she said, you can't help everybody, but you can help somebody. You can't help everyone, but you can help someone. And when we look at philanthropy and charity work and volunteering and donating, we always look at it as a bigger picture. Well, I know I do. I shouldn't say we do. I know I do. But we can always take one step at a time, help one person, donate to one charity, volunteer for one thing, and it begins to spiral and we help others. So let's do it with ourselves as well. Look inside ourselves. What's the one thing that we can improve, we can change, we can maybe do better, or we do great, and tell ourselves, hey, you did great at doing that. So ask yourself, who are you? If you don't like something, you can change it. If you do like it, celebrate yourself. That's what I hope others do.
Love it. It's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being on the show and for sharing your stories with us. And until next time.
Thank you, Elena. It's been a pleasure.